So I'd like to invite our second presenter in this session, Sara King, who is from Birmingham in the UK. And Sara's going to be presenting on how do maternity services support autistic women and birthing people. And she'll be exploring improvements to help autistic people and the staff who support them. Just to make you aware that there is a trigger warning for this presentation due to some of the issues that are covered, and there will be a reference made to suicide.
Thanks very much. Hello, everybody. Where to start? Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about my PhD project, which I'm currently writing up. So nearly at the end of it, there'll be more outputs coming shortly. But I want to really just share where I'm at now and findings so far. So in today's session, I'm going to tell you about my research aims and my reasons for doing the research. I'm going to talk a little bit about the autistic perinatal experience and why research about this area is important. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the project, the design, the approach, and some general findings. I'm going to give you some reflections about using Heuristic Inquiry, which is the approach I used, some implications for service and practice, and signposting to some resources too. So my research aims, I carried out a mixed methods heuristic inquiry, which I'm going to explain a bit more about in a moment. It was a peer-reviewed project by Autistica, which allowed me to have some funding to compensate the autistic people in phase 2 of my research and part-funded my fees. I self-funded the rest of it. And I wanted to understand what was the context in terms of statistical information and policy in maternity services in England. And though my research is based and looking at England, obviously it's transferable to other areas too. A lot of the findings will be transferable. I wanted to learn about the experiences and knowledge that maternity services staff had about supporting autistic people, and to then find out what autistic women and birthing people experienced when they actually accessed the services. And the intention was then to make recommendations for improvements to perinatal services for autistic people. So why, have I jumped forward one? Why this research? I'm going to tell you a little bit about my own personal story. These are my boys. I have their consent to share this photo. They're now both bigger than me. This is a very old photo. So I didn't know I was autistic before I had my children. They were incredibly wanted, but I did know that I would find the hospital environment really difficult. I knew that sensory experiences would be challenging for me, that lack of privacy would be challenging, but I didn't at that point have the language or the self-understanding around being autistic to explain why that was at this point. I loved being pregnant. I was incredibly well and very fortunate that I was well throughout my pregnancy, both pregnancies. But I needed lots and lots of information, and I planned in detail, did loads of reading, read loads of research. I'd packed my cases by 4 months. I felt that a lot of my needs around that was seen by others as excessive, but it actually really helped me manage my anxiety and provided predictability. Not knowing when or how labour would start was especially hard. I rely on routine. My first birth ended in an emergency cesarean. Because of that, I had a planned one for my second. Staff were really kind, but often didn't understand my needs. I sometimes felt dismissed when more information or different support could have really helped me. Sensory challenges made things worse, and I worry sometimes that I was seen as difficult. After births, the postnatal ward environment was overwhelming, particularly from a sensory perspective. And becoming a mum brought huge changes. My boys were healthy, but I struggled with what was thought at that time that was postnatal depression and anxiety for years afterwards. I now suspect there was also autistic burnout involved. I was a committed mum. I cared for my children really well, but my stress and anxiety were constant for years. I found developing a relationship with my children really instinctive and natural and joyful, but outside of that, the social requirements of being a parent were unknown to me and really challenging. And I developed some masks for other areas of my life, but I didn't yet have a mum mask, and I felt that was really challenging. I didn't really know how to navigate that. Once I realised I was autistic, the challenges I'd experienced at that time made absolute sense to me. And I wondered, if I felt like that and I'd had good care, how might other autistic people feel, particularly if they didn't have good care or a good experience? This led to me completing a project as part of a PG DIP back in 2018. And then I started this part-time research back in 2019. It's been a long time coming with the part-time process. And then since that time, there's been an increased interest in this area. Some things have changed. For example, in England, we now have the Oliver McGowan training in place, but please do bear that in mind when I'm talking about findings and things. So why is it important? And what are the issues when we're thinking about reducing barriers to improve quality of life for autistic women and birthing people? Autism in girls and women is typically been under-researched. We may be late diagnosed or late identified as autistic. We might be misdiagnosed, undiagnosed completely. This is starting to change, but people may not realise they're autistic when having their children. We might need different support at this time, for example, communication, infant feeding. We might experience different sensory experiences. Hormone changes might impact on that. Pain presentation might be different. And we may have co-occurring conditions such as Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, or hypermobility, or epilepsy, or ADHD that can really impact in the perinatal experience. It's very important. We already know that there are health disparities and barriers to accessing healthcare services for autistic people. And the double empathy theory, and now the triple empathy theory, when thinking about healthcare, has identified this mismatch of communication and understanding between autistic and non-autistic people. So when we're thinking about healthcare, that's a really important issue, particularly around maternity services. Misunderstanding and stigma exists despite autistic mothers demonstrating really positive parenting and bonding. And subsequently, there's a need for the right support for autistic people accessing maternity services. Masking can also impact and could lead to individuals seeming to be managing in the environment, often hiding difficulties until they can't any longer. We also need to consider autistic staff working in that same environment. What are their needs? Autistic people may have other autistic family members and may need to consider a range of autistic needs in their family. So it's a multi-layered situation when we're thinking about this. And if needs aren't met, there could be an ongoing impact on well-being. And we already know that autistic women are already at higher risk of suicide and self-harm. So that's why this is an important issue to be looking at. So just talking about my research design, I did extensive piloting and sense checking of research materials with autistic people for language and accessibility. I did freedom of information requests, asking various organisations within England for specific information about statistics they had about autistic people. I then did a questionnaire with maternity services staff in England. It was in the height of COVID. I had 99 responses and was ecstatic. I'd aimed for a lot more. And then I'd tried to have interviews, and I had targeted 5, and I had 18 people wanting to be interviewed, which was amazing. I also then, the next phase was interviewing autistic women, and I had 8 interviews, including my own experience as part of that, which I'll talk about now. Just as a note, a lot of the maternity services staff, 5 of them were autistic, and 12 of them had autistic family members. So there was a very high proportion of autistic engagement from a participant perspective. So I'll talk about a heuristic inquiry. I felt a real autistic glimmer when I found this heuristic inquiry, and it's from the same root Greek word as eureka, which I also really liked. It's a flexible approach where the researcher must have personal experience of the research topic and is passionate about it. And I think it might be a useful approach for other autistic researchers that are particularly interested in something they've experienced. I found it particularly useful for me. It can be used for transformation in self, in others, and in systems. And the researcher is at the heart, recognizing their own positionality and sharing their experience with others, which can help with trust and a shorthand, which I found incredibly helpful. And it can be very useful for big events in life, which is ideal for this topic. As an autistic person that's used maternity services in England, my own experiences and positionality really shaped this research, but there's still rigor in the process to make sure the analysis is robust and that I'm reporting participants' experiences accurately too. Sorry, it's not moved me on. There. So obviously there's loads of different stages of this. So I just want to share my reflections on the findings as a whole. I'd be really happy to talk to anybody that's interested in finding out more, so please do get in touch. But there was very limited data when I approached for freedom of information. The organisations really didn't have anything. That is changing, and there are some new data sets now nationally, but people weren't holding data about the autistic service users in maternity services. There was a real lack of maternity-specific policy and guidance. It really was, at that point I started this, autistic women and birthing people were just not really considered as something that needs to be thought about. There was agreement from staff and service users that there were significant issues affecting maternity services, generally funding, resourcing, and that was affecting everybody, but compounding impact on autistic people. There was a lack of understanding and there was a stigma. Lack of maternity-specific autism training. And staff involved in the research typically wanted to provide excellent care, and that contrasted with how the autistic mothers described their experiences, although there were some examples of good care. And I think that may be explained by double empathy, triple empathy, or epistemic injustice. Autistic staff and staff with autistic family members often provided information to their wider teams using their own personal knowledge and expertise, demonstrating real commitment to making improvements. And there was a strong desire for social justice from autistic participants. They got involved because they really wanted to make change for other people, driving change from the ground up. So implications for service and practice. Just thinking about some of these. For general recommendations, national policies and guidance are needed to drive change from the top down to meet that bottom-up kind of stuff that's happening now. There needs to be autism policy and pathway in maternity services. It's crucial to ensure that all staff have maternity-specific autism training. And I'm talking about all staff, from the receptionist through to anyone that's patient-facing. It wasn't just midwives involved in my research. There were a range of staff roles. A specialist autism team could be really helpful in the same way that we have perinatal mental health care. Continuity of care is really important, and improved in-service communication. Think about environmental audit, look at the sensory environment, and autistic peer support was really helpful. During delivery of care, reflective practice, thinking about when we're thinking about supporting individuals, autistic informed, neurodivergent informed, reflective care. When somebody's stating that they're autistic and saying what their needs are, that needs to be supported, and trust is really important. Individualised care, tailored care, and appropriate adjustments need to be put in place. And think about advocacy needs, whether someone can self-advocate, whether they have a communication partner, or whether the staff can be involved in that too. Co-occurring conditions are crucial to be considering. They can have a really big impact in the situation. And think about care requirements throughout the whole perinatal journey, because the needs may vary at all different stages of pregnancy, birth, and the early part of parenting. And don't make assumptions, listen and believe. So I just very quickly, final slide, I've gone over time. I want to, typically, the night before the conference, our website has gone down. Please take a photo if you can and come back and revisit the Maternity Autism Research Group website, MARGE. We're an autistic-led volunteer collective. We're multidisciplinary, cross-institutional. I met these people as a part of the research, a part of my PhD journey, and we're either autistic researchers or autistic health professionals with an aim to improve the experiences of autistic people when accessing perinatal services. So the website should be back up in the next few days. Please do take a note of this and come back and visit. There's loads of resources, books, useful information that hopefully you will find of interest. Thank you very much. I don't know that there's time for questions because I've gone over a bit, but there's some references there. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sara. 12 minutes is just so short, covering such an important topic. Sara was aware that she may run a little bit over time and had agreed then that she's very open to take questions throughout the Congress. She'll be here all 3 days. Sara, is that correct? And is happy for people to approach her and ask her questions on that presentation throughout the Congress.